I don't need people telling me what I want to hear. I need people to tell me what I need to hear. The biggest thing that I always talk about is how do you avoid blind spots? To me, that is so critical.
What was the biggest surprise for you when you ultimately got into leading teams?
I remember the first day I woke up as a leader, it is 180 degrees different. You become a very selfless person when you're a manager. It's no longer about you. It's what you need each one of those people to do in order for you to be successful. Nobody told me that.
As a leader, focus is the superpower that you can give your reps.
If you don't have that good qualification criteria, that's where things start to fall out. For me, moving from being a CPA to being a CRO, you get there by sometimes taking some different paths. 4 o'clock on the last day of the quarter, all of a sudden realize, oh wow, I think we got a problem here. I got a little sloppy at the end. CIO had signed all the documents, but she had not signed one. I reached out to her to make sure that we could get this deal done. She was already gone. She was at her child's soccer match.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Ever wonder what automating your entire outbound workflow could do for your revenue team? Apollo brings this to life by centralizing your entire go-to-market execution in one platform. Sellers using automation in their outbound efforts see a 70% increase in open rates and 4 times more meetings booked, while of course saving hours and hours on manual, tedious tasks that we all hate to do. Their tried and tested library of built-in workflow templates will help you get started from scratch, even if automated outreach is brand new to you. Topping the list of sales platforms, Apollo has over 7,000 reviews and a 4.8 star rating on G2. I'm a big fan. Go to apollo.io/GTM now so that you can schedule some time with their team to get set up and get successful using their platform. Now, on to the episode. Hello. Welcome back to the GTM podcast. You've got Scott Barker here. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got a great chat lined up today. I am joined by Matt Breslin. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. Great to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. Where are you recording this from? Where's home for you?
Well, home is Chicago, but I'm recording this from sunny, hot Austin, Texas. So Upland is based in Austin. I'm here this week. The office is very cold. I actually had to go outside because it was so cold to warm up, but I was quickly able to do that because it's about 102 right now in Austin.
Whew, 102. Yeah. I feel like most people get out of Dodge around this time in Austin. They don't fly to Austin this time of year.
I will say that the city is not as busy as it was probably in April, May, because to that very point, people don't really want to be hanging out in 102 degrees.
Yeah, I do love Austin though. It's a super fun city, great food, great music. I always enjoy my time there. So super quickly for the listeners. So Matt is the Chief Revenue Officer at Upland, where he oversees customer success, demand gen, communication, sales, revenue enablement, revenue analysis, and the shared services organization. So kind of everything is rolling up to this man. And you have 25 years experience in the software industry. So you're a vet. And most recently, I saw you were leading, what was it, like a $700 million line of business at Infor, which is huge. And then prior, senior leader positions at SAP, Oracle, which is really cool. And then I believe if I read your bio correctly, you actually started out as a certified public accountant. So you don't see a ton of accountant to CRO career trajectories. How did that happen?
Look, I will tell you, back early 90s, if someone told me that I was going to be a CRO 30 years later, I would have kind of scratched my head a little bit. But, I was in college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. I was good at math. And someone's like, well, then you probably should be an accounting major. So I was an accounting major. And out of that, got some great experience, worked at Pricewaterhouse in public accounting for a few years, worked as a financial analyst at Kraft Foods for a few years. And it really kind of gave me a great opportunity to get that foundation from a financial perspective. I just knew from a career standpoint, it's not really what I wanted to do. So then I was going back to school at night. I went to Northwestern, got my MBA at night, and frankly was planning to move more into the marketing and strategy side, which is what I got my major in. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, someone's looking for someone I talked to at Oracle is looking for someone who can sell financial applications to consumer goods companies." And I thought, well, I'm a financial analyst working at a consumer goods company. Worst case, I'm going to be terrible at it. But you know what? In 1997, it felt like tech was not a bad place to go. Didn't know anything about software at the time. And then 25 years later, I'm still doing it, and it actually worked out quite well.
I love it, man. It always makes sense when we connect the dots backwards, and that that traditional, I kind of call it hire the buyer model, can work extremely, extremely well, right? Like if you've lived the experience of the person that you're selling into, and you bring that into an account executive position, you've just got such an advantage. You know the colloquial terms, you know their way of living and how they do their job, and it can be a superpower. Is that something that you have mirrored in your career and maybe tried to hire that way since it worked well for you?
Yeah, so you know what? It's interesting because actually my first job was as a solution consultant. So it really kind of gave me the opportunity at Oracle to learn the product, figure out how it actually was being used. And when I was doing that after a few years, everyone kept saying, "You know what? I kind of see you more as an account executive. I see you know, customer facing. Really, frankly, how you can go out and close deals." That served me really well because I think having the financial background earlier in my career, and then knowing the product that I'm actually trying to sell to a customer went a long way from a credibility standpoint because I could have the conversations. In many cases, you're not just selling to a CIO, you're often selling to a CFO. I could have that conversation from a financial standpoint and at least to your point, kind of know his or her way of thinking and what are the touch points that they think about from a financial standpoint. Even when I was looking at kind of showing the ROI on some of the deals that I was presenting to customers, it goes a long way when you can actually have a little more meat behind that conversation. And then from a product standpoint, when I spent the first couple of years demoing the product, I had a much better foundation for what is the value of what ultimately I'm selling to my customers. So yes, to answer your question, it really was when I look at folks that I'm trying to bring into the business as I've hired over my career, certainly from a sales standpoint, you need people that are aggressive, people who have that can do mentality. But I think the people that also can bring substance, whether it's having that strong product foundation, that strong financial foundation, that kind of is that what I call the superpower that really kind of lets some people stand out.
Totally. It's an interesting conversation I was having with another guest on this podcast of the like, do you optimize for sellers with domain expertise, or do you optimize for sellers with like great sales fundamentals? And it's an interesting debate to have. And I think the point that was brought up was with kind of the influx of AI applications coming that might make the ability for our sellers to uh, not have to have as much domain expertise because they might have a co-pilot serving them up all the different answers that they need. That maybe it's back to fundamentals, but it's a fun debate anyway.
It's a good point. I think there's room for both. I mean, it's clearly in sales, it's a battle, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's for folks that find a way to get things done, find a way to be aggressive, find a way to be creative. And you always kind of have to have that mentality. Someone who is a very reactive person is just not going to do well from a long term perspective in sales. I do think, though, it's interesting because we just actually recently hired someone here in Austin, one of our sales leaders, and we were going through that very process. We looked at one of our leaders who we had to make a change, and for this person, we were trying to figure out is bringing someone in who's got that sales management, who can provide that rigor and that accountability and drive it within his or her organization, is that more important than the frankly the institutional knowledge around a particular industry, or in this case, a certain market that we thought was important. We actually felt in this case, because it was one of our knowledge management solutions, that having some of that domain expertise was very valuable. And we brought somebody from a competitor. Already, I think it's kind of showing that it's I think going to be very good for us in terms of someone who knows who he's selling to, uh, and the types of customers, and can have that conversation and kind of know also just what are some of the dynamics in the industries that we're selling to around the knowledge management solutions that we're selling. But he also, he's bringing the accountability to the organization and to his sales team that is really important as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if technology is anywhere close enough to being able to build, years and years of, learned expertise, domain authority, trust. We're nowhere near there yet. So that makes sense. Cool. So I really want to dive into this story. I know this is a story based podcast primarily, and I know you've got a great one about this like big deal. And I'm a sales nerd at heart, come from a sales background, so I love deal stories. But before we get there, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of just aligning sales, marketing, customer success to drive revenue growth. I know, at Upland, and that's kind of your bread and butter, and would love to just talk through what does that actually mean. I mean, like alignment is thrown out all the time. It's kind of become like a buzzword. We sit in, meetings from time to time. We try and get more aligned, but what does that actually mean to you?
Well, I think the way I look at it is what I call the closed loop process. There is, not having one touch point with a customer or a prospect, be it with sales, be it with customer success, be it demand gen. It's not enough. At the end of the day, we look at the funnel, right? Of taking that, starting off with identifying those opportunities and doing that demand generation, but making sure that that flows seamlessly throughout the entire organization, such that we find the right opportunities, we're getting them to the right people that can actually then prosecute those opportunities to ultimately go win those opportunities, to have a nice seamless handoff in what I call the customer journey to our customer success team or to our implementation team, to make sure that they are getting the red carpet rolled out for them so that they're having a good experience. So when we talk about that journey, we close the deal. That's just the commencement. That's just the beginning. How do we then start thinking about where we take it from there so that these customers want to invest with us for the next 10, 20 years? Then that's that whole closed loop process that, frankly, for the deals that we win, how do we then take that back and then bring that back to our demand gen team and say, that deal closed because we did these things right. We addressed these specific points with this customer. Here's the value proposition that really resonated with them. And then how do we then push that back up to the top of the funnel? We say, do more of that. For the deals that unfortunately we don't win, same thing. Why do we lose that deal? What were the things that we did wrong? What didn't resonate? And how do we push that back up and say, don't do more of that going forward as well? So I think that's really when I start thinking about my organization and the whole go-to-market team, it's not just getting the sale. It's not just getting the renewal. It's not just getting enough pipeline to keep the business healthy. It's making sure that all of those things happen continuously, and we're continually to drive that closed loop process to make sure that everything we learn at each stage in the cycle of that customer journey or that prospect journey funnels throughout the organization. So when you're talking about alignment, you're right. I think it is somewhat of a buzzword, but I think that's kind of how you bring everything together.
Yep. As much as people will often say pipeline is the answer to all your problems, I'm not sure how true that is. It's quality pipeline that is the answer to all your problems. And when you can really narrow down on your ICP, and if you start spending time and resources on folks that maybe are really tough to pull across the line, even if you do pull them across the line. I think Mark Costaglo, former CRO of Outreach, now CEO of Operator, put it really well. I think he's called it, you're closing churn. You're spending all this time and money to close this customer that is ultimately going to churn in a year, and that's going to be a really net negative for the business.
Totally agree. The way I've explained it to folks, I don't spend a ton of time looking at pipeline multiples, 3x, 4x, 5x. And I think that's actually, I know that one of the things that we were going to talk about, but I think that's a misnomer that I think a lot of people have. It's an easy number to go, yep, I got my 3x, I'm good. But if you got 3x of junk, that's not good. And what I've really pushed with my teams throughout the years, I would much rather have a lower multiple, but if we can make sure we have that quality pipe, that is so much more valuable because it's actually worse to get teams to go build a bunch of pipeline and people will say, I I I build enough pipeline. I did what you asked me to do. And then what happens is we start expending time, money, and resources on opportunities that have very little chance of success. That's actually worse than not even working on those opportunities at all. Because all you're doing is you're throwing money down the drain. You're redirecting time, money, and resources against other opportunities that we should be putting them against. So I think really that's from a pipeline standpoint, that to me is so important to make sure that we get that, you're right, get that ICP right, get that addressable market right, and figure out how we then get the right opportunities that at least give you a relative probability of success.
And a quick pause to hear from our partners at Vanta. We've all been there. Your deal is almost closed, and all that's left is the security review. But when it comes to those lengthy security questionnaires, the endless back and forth between you, your security team, and the customer can often cause deals to stall out, leaving your deal at risk and dollars on the table. With Vanta questionnaire automation, go-to-market teams can complete security reviews up to 5 times faster, helping you close deals in less time than ever. Over 8,000 global companies like ZoomInfo, Smart Recruiters, and Noibu use Vanta to streamline security questionnaires and close deals faster. You can actually register for their upcoming webinar with live Q&A. It'll be Vanta in Action Questionnaire Automation. Check it out at vanta.com/GTM now. That's VANTA.com/GTMNOW. Now back to the discussion. Yeah, I would love to double click on that, and let's pull that question forward. Listeners will know I often ask this question at the end, and it's, what's one widely held belief that revenue leaders believe to be true that you think is bullshit? And this is a big one. People live and die by their 3 to 5x, pipeline, and hearing you say it and being part of a lot of different revenue organizations, you think of the behavior you're incentivizing. Like if you force that to be true, sellers are going to find a way to make that true, and they'll show you that they're at 3, 5x pipeline coverage, but it's just to tick a box, and you're almost forcing them to spend time and energy on things that they know won't close, won't close. How did you get comfortable with sacrificing, maybe a multiple for quality? Like maybe talk me through some of like your audit process, and what do you feel is a number or multiple you feel comfortable with as long as it's qualified?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of time is spent on that lead qualification scoring because I think it really helps figure out, you know what, it's that first check mark to go, are the basics in motion here to say that this is something that we should continue to explore and continue to push down the funnel. So that's like, spend a lot of time on that, getting that right. Because that's like almost like that's that first hurdle that you have to get over. Then to me, the next part is in many cases, and what I've seen over my career, very qualified leads sit there. You have to get the movement down the funnel to be as quickly as possible, as quick as possible. Because if not, I mean, when stuff stays stagnant, that's that's really bad for the business. And unfortunately, until you get a really tight process in place, that happens. In my last job, it was happening all the time. We had so many stagnant opportunities. And if you talk to, I would reach out to reps, I would reach out to BDRs, and there was always a valid reason. But guess what? None of those reasons really were very valid. At the end of the day, so people weren't doing their job. And as a result, you have the stagnant opportunities, and we are just literally walking away from potential deals that we can ultimately close. So I think for me, that quality is all about tightening the process internally, getting that first qualification criteria, feeling really good. Because in many cases, we're finding at top of funnel, you're finding opportunities, but they're coming from folks that are early in career and they're doing exactly what they're asked to do. Go find a lead. Go out and, we've given you an ICP, go out and find that lead, and then let's hand it off to people to go do their job to then run that through, hopefully to closure. But in many cases, if you don't have that good qualification criteria, and that's really solid, that's where things start to fall out. So if you get that right, and then you get tightening of the internal processing and the internal handoff process, that's when the quality, helps with our win rates.
Yeah. No, that all makes complete sense. And you think of just one stale opportunity that sits in your CRM for 7 months and the amount of time you and your sales manager, you and your VP, you and your CRO are going to talk about that. Like just the time alone, if it's just sitting there, like get them out, get them out, move on. The old adage of, the second best answer in sales is no. Just get to that no and move on. I think it's a good way to look at it. Beautiful, man. Well, I want to transition and spend some time on kind of this story you have, which I'm super excited to hear about. We always like to talk about impactful stories, and when it's a deal story, I get super excited. And so I think this one's coming from early in your career. So let's fly you back to that time period and set the stage.
Yeah. So 2003. I am probably 2 or 3 years into my career as an account executive at Oracle. As I said, first couple of years I spent in pre-sales, moved into an account role, and had some initial success. And then this opportunity came up, and it was a big opportunity, and very competitive. Worked the sales cycle, I think, quite well. Ultimately, we were selected as vendor of choice, and it was a big enough deal that it mattered. It mattered, obviously. Clearly, it mattered to me. It mattered to my boss, my boss's boss, and all the way up the chain. Right. This was, as a publicly held company, this was a deal that definitely was on the radar all the way up at Redwood Shores.
Can you give us a number range on the contract value?
Several $1 million, right? This is 20 years ago. So it was a good sized deal. So we're working through everything. We're working through contracts, MSA, and we're getting to the end of the quarter, and we finally, get to the point where we're ready to sign the deal. Last day of the quarter. Because it was order form, master agreement, there was a statement of work, multiple different contracts that needed to be signed. And we go have the signing ceremony, everything gets done, and I'm high five. Coming back to the office in Chicago, everyone's super excited, send the contracts in, and what's the first thing that I do? The rookie mistake that I make is I already had the congratulations email that was ready to go to everybody and their mother talking about this big win and thanking all the people that helped get this deal done. And I would say within 5 minutes of hitting send, I get a phone call from our orders department who says, hey, we're missing, and I don't remember, this is 20 years ago. We're missing one of the documents for the order package. And started thinking about it for a second there, and all of a sudden realize, oh, wow, I think we got a problem here. This is probably 4:00 on the last day of the quarter. And I go into panic mode. And it was almost like I had jinxed myself by sending that email out because I had not double checked And, you're at the end of the quarter. And usually I would say, myself as a CPA, I'm usually pretty good in terms of attention to detail. I got a little sloppy at the end and I missed a document. CIO had signed all the documents, but she had not signed one. There is a good ending to this story because, fortunately, I had developed enough of a relationship, not only with the CIO, but with her entire team. A lot of time had been spent, frankly, on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we could get this deal done. I reached out to her. I reached out to several people on her team. She was already gone. She was at her child's soccer match. I reached out to several people on her team. They were able to get me in contact with her. And I drove out to the Chicago suburbs, met her at her child's soccer match to have her sign the last document that was necessary in order for us to be able to book the deal for the quarter. So, lesson learned is don't get sloppy. Make sure that you check and double check. And then for when things are done, and I have told this to my team whenever I see an email, the congratulatory email, do not send that email out until you have internal confirmation that we have every document necessary in order to book the deal. So that's number one. Number two, I would say make sure this is where having the strong relationship with my customer, not just at one level in the organization, but at multiple levels. When I made a mistake like that, I was able to go back and say, mea culpa on my part. I really need some help here. Fortunately, I had enough of a relationship where I was able to rectify it and not have it become a much bigger problem.
Yeah, that's a great story, and thanks for sharing that one. My heart absolutely sunk for you. That must have been the worst phone call you could possibly get at 4 p.m. when you're, I would imagine, popping some champagne or
I was about
a
to
few.
go out to the bar to celebrate. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
I think I was halfway to the elevator.
Couldn't imagine that feeling you have, and thank God you weren't actively at the bar yet, so you could make that drive to the soccer game. But that's how it's done.
Those relationships are critical.
Yeah, those are the points we remember in our career. So any revenue leaders, AEs, founders listening to this, like sometimes it takes literally driving to someone's baseball game to make it happen. And I hope at least that weekend you had a good time and were able to celebrate a little.
It all worked out.
We're going to take a quick pause from this interview to talk about hiring. Hiring for startups is really hard. You are battling the attention of smart, driven people, being bombarded with a ton of opportunities. Plus, it can be time consuming going through all the candidates and challenging to know who is the best fit. Should you hire the person who's been there, done that? The up and comer stepping into the bigger role for the first time? Is stage fit or domain expertise more important for this particular role? Most recruiting firms fill an order. For us, we highly recommend IPS. They are just a different breed of search firm. They've dug into your business to understand its current state and the future vision and are relentless in their pursuit of finding the very best leaders, salespeople, marketers, engineering talent that you need. Integrity Power Search has placed over 2,000 candidates for early to mid-stage startups in its 12-year history, with specialists that focus by function, leveling from mid-level ICs all the way up to the C-level. All right, so with a very senior team, I've met them all. They're pretty rad, including past startup operators. They've seen firsthand the change of trajectory your company can take when you are intentional and aggressive about bringing the right people at the right time. So whether you want advice, have one hard to fill role, or you have a full team build out, we can't recommend IPS enough. Visit Integrity Power Search. That's www.integritypowersearch.com to learn more or connect with them on your next search. What advice would you have? Because we do have, a lot of revenue leaders that listen to this, founders, but also, sellers themselves. And that sounds like that was one of the biggest deals that you worked on at that time. You mentioned a few things, but kind of broad strokes advice for working your first deal that could be 10x the size, and this happens to just come up. And how would you coach people to approach their first, we'll call it mega deal?
Yeah, it's a great point. As I said, that attention to detail is absolutely critical. what I would say, and honestly, it's for new reps, but it's for experienced reps. The biggest thing that I always talk about is how do you avoid blind spots? To me, that is so critical. We one of our flagship products is a product called Ultify that we use a sales effectiveness tool. And, really what it's designed to do is to make sure that we avoid those blind spots. How do you get better insights and how do you align the sales process to the business pains, the business processes of a customer or a prospect? The more questions that you're asking and the more probing questions that you're asking to make sure that you don't have those blind spots, that goes a long way to getting a much greater probability that you're going to get your deal done. So whenever I've conducted thousands of forecast calls over the years as a sales leader, um, I'll often say, do we have any blind spots here? Right? Have you asked not just the first question, but that second level, that third level question, just to make sure that we're not missing anything? And you need something like an Ultify to make sure that you can be in a position to go, I'm asking the right questions. It's not just a matter of just asking for the sake of asking, but I'm asking the right questions that are aligned to really whether it be the buying process or what the business pains are, so that we really are at a point where we're not going to get that call. I'm not going to have that mess up like I had, 20 years ago, but that's an eternal blind spot on my side. But also in many cases, it may be you have a blind spot to what's going on the other side of the aisle. And there's a much greater probability that you're going to avoid that if you're asking the right questions that are tied to, what's important to your customer or prospect.
Yeah, great call out. And huge fan of the Altify product. If folks haven't checked it out, would highly recommend it. We'll put a link in the show notes. Being able to identify those blind spots are crucial in deals and in life. Can I get an Altify for my life blind spots too? That would
Exactly.
be
I think we could all use that maybe at certain points in our life.
totally. I love it. So following the same vein, okay, so you're closing these, big deals, you're having some success as an IC. When did you first feel like you wanted to get into leadership, and when were you given that shot?
Yeah, great question. I knew I wanted to get into leadership. I really felt like, as much as I enjoyed being an individual contributor, I felt like my skill set was fit to lead teams and be able to develop talent that way. Um, Interestingly enough, I was at IC for almost 6 years. Felt longer than I wanted, and part of it was because I was doing well. I was on a track to move into management, but right around the same time that, frankly, I was probably ready to move is when Oracle bought PeopleSoft. So PeopleSoft came in, brought a whole layer of management in, and I had to wait my turn, right? Because it was, they integrated the different sales organizations. There were several sales leaders that were already in place, and I kind of had to wait my turn. Finally, I got to the point where I said, you know what? There was an opportunity that opened up on the technology side of the house at Oracle, selling middleware. And this is 2006, and it felt very much like late 90s when I was making the move out of finance and accounting into software. I thought, as I said before, if I'm no good at it, I can definitely go back to what I was doing before, but it was a good move then. Same thing applied here. I went from being on the application side of the house to knowing nothing about middleware, but it was an opportunity to move into a leadership role. And I've said, once again, if I'm not good at it, I can probably move back to the application side of the house. Fortunately, we were able to be successful that first year, and I was able to parlay that into additional management opportunities from there. So my advice would be to folks is that you can take the traditional path, and sometimes it does mean having to move to something that is completely out of your comfort zone. For me, moving from eventually, originally being a CPA to being a CRO, you get there by sometimes taking some different paths in terms of where your experience is or where your comfort is. For me, moving into middleware that I didn't know anything about, but was able to successfully lead sales teams, ultimately helped grow my career.
Yeah. What was the biggest surprise for you when you ultimately got into leading teams?
I tell people this all the time, because I've hired many leaders over the years, and I'm sometimes almost accused of trying to talk people out of it, and it's not, and I'm not. I just want to be real. I want to be authentic with folks. I said, I remember the last day I was a rep on a Friday till the first day I woke up on Monday morning as a leader. It is 180 degrees different because you go from being a selfish person because it's all about you as a contributor. Me. This is what I need in order for me to get, in order to hit my number. So you become a very selfless person when you're a manager because you are now helping 6, 8, 10 folks, and it's no longer about you. It's what you need each one of those people to do in order for you to be successful. So nobody told me that. I just, and it was, frankly, it seems to, logical that it would make sense, but nobody really characterized it as such a dramatic change. So it definitely was an adjustment. Fortunately, I had some good team members. I had to make some changes. Ultimately, we did. And, you just realize that it no longer becomes about what you need. It's what does all of your team need and what can you do to help get the most out of that, because you can't rely upon one person. You need certainly enough of the team being successful in order for you to be able to hit that bigger goal.
Yeah. Definitely requires you to take a very hard look in the mirror if you're ready for that. Like, and if you're still wanting to be selfish, that's okay. But make sure that you know what you're signing up to. And I think that's a really good way to put it. You go from selfish to selfless, and neither one is better. It becomes more than just you. Other question I wanted to ask, because people don't talk about this a lot. If you could give your direct report, so the leaders that report directly to you, advice on managing up effectively, like what advice would you give those folks? Let's say senior directors, VPs, they're interacting with their CRO. Of course they get some feedback here and there, but it's like broad strokes. How do you like your leaders to interact with you?
To me, what I find to be most valuable is when I have a pretty authentic relationship with my directs. And I think too often, and probably early in my career as a lead, whether it was as a IC or as a manager, I think there was a little bit of fear of I had to tell my boss what I thought he or she wanted to hear as opposed to what was real. And, now, leading the go-to-market team for a $275 million company, I don't need people telling me what I want to hear. I need people to tell me what I need to hear. So for me, I've found that when I am more successful in terms of leading teams is when I can have that authentic relationship enough that we can have the hard conversations. And there might be conversations where I get information I don't want to hear, but I think it's important to be able to have that. And I think, as you manage up, you have to be able to do it in a way such that your business, you're not sandbagging, right? You're doing it in a way where you can really give a true, honest assessment of what's going well, what's not going well, because that's what I need. My span of responsibility is big enough that I need people that can tell me what's the real story. So having that authentic relationship is what I would tell people is what leaders need.
Yeah, and I feel like it requires trust from both sides, and you can tell you're the leader that leads with trust, and therefore you want the full and honest version of what's going on, and not the nicely painted version. I see this all the time, in my current role with just being, a board observer and going to some boarded meetings for our founders. And you can see very clearly the ones who have almost, they've spent a lot of time on it, great, because they're prepared, but they've almost like over engineered it. And they're very much saying all the good things and like what we want to hear. And those meetings end up not being very effective because we don't know how to help, how to support. And then there's other ones that come in, disheveled, and they almost use it as like group therapy of like, here's what's going on. This is stressing me out. I can't figure this shit out. Tell me what to do here. I'm making this bet over here, but it's not really working. And then we can have a really honest, dialogue, because people, whether you're a leader supporting your reports or you're an investor supporting these companies, like everyone is there to help you. And if we're not getting the whole and complete picture of what's going on, it's just hard to give contextual help when needed.
And it goes back to what I was saying earlier on blind spots, because if someone's just telling you what you want to hear out of fear, out of not having the confidence to tell you the real situation, what's that going to happen? It means that I have a blind spot as a leader in terms of really what's going on with the business. As much as I challenge my teams to make sure that you don't have blind spots, I can't have blind spots either. The reason I'm not going to have blind spots is if I have those authentic relationships that we can have honest conversation on truly what's going on with the business.
Yeah. One more question on kind of your day to day, and I love asking, true CROs, incredible CROs like yourself, this question: how many times a week are you still on customer calls? And there's no right or wrong answer. I'm curious.
Not enough. When I was with a customer last week, it happened to be in Chicago, so it actually worked out great. And I said, hey, it's a perfect opportunity for me not to be on the road. And I loved it. I certainly think even in a post-COVID world, it's less than before because I'm challenging my teams to get out in front of customers more and more. As my span of responsibility and my career has continued to grow, one of the things that I do miss is not having as much of that customer touch points that I really enjoyed. That's what got me into this in the first place, right? 25 years ago when I said, I don't know if I wanted to be sitting behind a computer crunching numbers every day. I want to get out and talk to people, and I want to go sell, and I want to be able to use what I think is a strength of mine to be able to go tell people why they need to buy something from me. Not being able to do that as much is just because there's so many other things to do in terms of managing the business. One of the things that I'm definitely focused on is how do I, as I'm getting up to speed here, how do I get to a point where a certain portion of my week can be tied to whether it's customer calls or getting out face to face with customers? It does make a difference. I know we live in a very different world than even 5 years ago, but I do believe that having those meetings, the meeting that I had last week in Chicago, it went a long way. It went a long way because we were in a competitive sales cycle. I know the other competitor did not come and meet with them face to face. We did, and we'll see what happens. But I certainly feel very good about our chances by having that direct interaction with them.
It's such a balance, and it's so difficult, to do both once you're at the C-suite level. I remember all the, outreach executives that have access to their calendar, and I'm just like, oh my God, like you're not sleeping and finding those time for customers. I've toyed around with this idea for a while now, and I think we might start seeing some version of it is as technology, increases our efficiency across organizations. Obviously, headcount is kind of like shrinking. We might need fewer, maybe sellers, fewer BDRs, but I could see a world where we almost have like dual C-suite roles. Like you'd have a CRO, like almost two CROs. Maybe you call it something different, but one is extremely public facing, extremely customer oriented, and then the other one is actually, running the revenue organization. Same with like CMOs. You have one that is on all the podcasts, doing all these things, and then one that's actually, making sure the campaigns are going out, the CAC is correct, and all of that stuff. It's really difficult to do both. And I think we're demanding a lot now in this very social, public world that we live in of our C-suite execs.
Hey, I like that idea because you're right. I don't feel that there's enough hours in the day to do the things that I want to do well. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm doing all the right things internally. But I agree with you. You have to have that public presence that I think is important. And sometimes it's the difference on a particular deal, or it's the difference in terms of making sure that our Ultify brand or our Upland brand is visible enough in the marketplace to make a difference as well.
For sure. All right, this has been awesome, man. So Matt, thank you so much for spending the time in your crazy schedule. My final question for you, and I always keep this one the same, is what's just one go-to-market tactic or strategy that is actively working for you right now at Upland or Ultify?
Yeah. So for me, and I would say it's working at Upland. It's worked for me in my career. Is making sure that you have a sales organization and a customer, or really more the sales organization, tied to the right sales motions. And what I mean by that is I, at certain points in my career, were leading teams where they had very large bags of stuff that they could sell to a wide variety of customers and prospects. And at first that looked good because it's like, wow, this rep has a chance to make their number because they have a lot of customers, they have some white space territory, they have lots of products. And at the end of the day, when you have too much, you don't do anything particularly well. When I started realizing that getting new logos is absolutely critical to the long-term health of the business, you need a net new team that wakes up every day and the only thing that they're thinking about is, I'm not getting a commission check until I go find a net new customer. In the same vein, you need to have people who wake up every day and go, I need to make sure that customer continues to pay us every single year, and how I get a greater share of the wallet by going after that much more with that customer. And there's people that are good at those things, right? Some people are just those true hunters that they live for that. And that's, so important. When we're looking at our business right now and the way we've structured it, we're getting the growth that we're looking for because we're putting people in those right sales motions. And I'll give you one example. In my last job, we had a team of folks that for a while I was managing our edge solutions. So we had ERP, which was kind of the core foundation. And then you had all these edge solutions that were the surround sound. And they were sitting in all different parts of the business. Once we consolidated and we said, look, your job is to really focus on making sure that this entire edge team, we're doing the same thing all the time, make sure that we're really going after this business. It became a much bigger portion of the total portfolio. That's just one example of some of the growth. I think that an example of where you can drive growth. When you can look at how you can then either consolidate certain products and bring them together and make sure that you have that same sales motion, or you look at whether it's new logo, whether it's expansion, and people that are really good in those particular roles versus combining things, those hybrid roles don't work. That's ultimately, in my mind, what I've seen. When we do that, you get the most out of each swim lane, and those things add up to get you the growth that you're looking for.
Such a good point. Like focus is, as a leader, focus is the superpower that you can give your reps. And I remember learning this really early on. I was building one of my first BDR teams, and we had a huge kind of total addressable market, lots of companies we could go after. And when I would go up to a rep who was struggling and say, hey, I need you, and I'll spiff you, I'll give you a little bonus. I need you to break into these 5 companies forget everything else. Because before it was like, go to over 5,000. I need you to break into these 5, which seems like it's harder than the 5,000. Magically, within a few days, they would create an op at one of those 5, which was always mind blowing to me. And I would do that like right at the end of the quarter when we needed a few ops, and it was just really crazy. They get more creative. They get more. Everything comes when you're focused on kind of one singular goal, and we know that in sports. We know that in anything that's a competitive thing. But I like that. That's a good one. And I wanted to mention too. At Outreach, we did this. I can't remember the stage we're at. I think we're right around 100 mil ARR. But one of the great things we did, and it was a big internal shift, was breaking it out into net new AEs and then expansion AEs. And it had a really, really big impact because some of our best sellers had brought in these huge logos, and they were kind of, I wouldn't say coasting, but they knew this renewal was coming. They were growing pretty organically. And as soon as you decide, be like, okay, is that what you want to do? Do you want to grow this account? Then you can grow this account. If you want to go hunt and go for big logos, you can go, do that. And we saw a material impact in revenue growth when that happened. Awesome. Well, Matt, I appreciate you jumping on again. I'm a huge fan of Upland and everything you're doing at Altify. I encourage all our listeners to check it out. If people want to follow along on your journey, want to stay in touch with what Upland and Altify is doing, are you a LinkedIn guy, Twitter?
I'm a LinkedIn guy. It's all there. You can validate everything I just went through in my profile there, but absolutely encourage everybody. Feel free to reach out to me. Always love to connect with people in the industry, and it's been. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk today. It's been fun. It's good. It's a nice distraction with everything else I got going today to talk about the career for a little while.
Hell yeah! Hopefully, it gave you some energy. Now back to customer calls and spreadsheets, baby.
Exactly.
And to all our listeners, I say it every week. Listening's one thing, executing's totally different. Hopefully, we gave you some inspiration, tactics, strategies to take to your own organization. And we will see you all next week.